clouds, our skills, our resiliency, and our tools. Where this shows up, that is most important, is in our boundaries. Today we're going to explore why having solid, supported boundaries are so important when you are doing your grief work. If you haven't already joined our Grievolution community, please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications so that you will know every time we're talking about a different aspect of grief. Share this channel also with anybody who you think might find some support in doing grief differently. I've been working in the mental health field for decades, and whether I'm working with mental illness or addictions, family dysfunction, crisis work, it all comes down to one common denominator, and that is around personal emotional boundaries. Boundaries, healthy boundaries, are the core to any relationship. So what are boundaries? Boundaries are that invisible barrier that defines emotionally and sometimes physically where I start and stop and where you start and end. So first of all, let's talk about why boundaries are even important. Well, boundaries protect relationships from becoming unsafe or ungrounded or unsupportive. When grief is in our lives, the need for safety and protection and grounding is heightened. Boundaries allow us to conserve our emotional energy. Grief is very greedy, and it will sometimes demand all of your time, attention, and your emotional bandwidth. So if you are needing to spend time on dysfunctional or blurred boundaries, then that is distracting you from doing the very grief work that you need to be doing. Boundaries give us space to safely choose when and how and with whom to be vulnerable. Grief work requires choices of when and how to do this, and having safe, grounded, protective boundaries is going to allow you the correct opportunities as opposed to spending time reinforcing and guarding and legitimizing and justifying your boundaries. Sometimes our boundaries are very clear. I won't be spoken to that way. I won't be touched that way. I won't be treated that way. But sometimes our boundaries are not so clear. For example, when we are grieving, many boundaries get pushed, tested, trampled, and overstepped. An example of this could be, is this my grief that we're actually dealing with, or is this your discomfort with my grief that is actually impacting this connection? When we are grieving, often people will think that they know what is good for us. Such sage advice is offered. Pack up their clothes, start dating again, focus on the children you do have. You're young, get pregnant again. All of these are missteps in boundaries. When somebody else decides, even though it may come from a loving, caring, concerned place, when somebody else decides that they know better of what's right for you in your grief, then that is a broken, blurred boundary. The tricky part is that some days when you're grieving, you don't want to make any decisions and you're happy to turn it over to other people. Other days when you are grieving, you want to control the weather, you want to control the moon and the stars, and you want to control anything and everything all around you. It gets very confusing. The tricky part when we're grieving is that our boundaries are often fluctuating and are often being challenged. If this feels all so familiar, then please put a comment below in terms of a time that you felt you needed to guard some of your healthy boundaries, or in retrospect where you realize that your boundary, even though it might have come from a place of love, where your boundary might have been violated, pushed, or tested. This is such a common occurrence. If you could leave a comment below, I'd so appreciate it so that we can all see that we aren't alone in this experience. So where do our boundaries come from? Where do they stem from? Where are they created from? What makes our boundaries form in the first place? So one of the first places to think of where your boundaries have come from, of course, is your childhood, your nuclear family. That can be influenced by our heritage, by our religion, by our culture. They can then be influenced by whether we are an introvert or an extrovert. Somewhere in between, they are then influenced by our own life experiences. They are then influenced by family dynamics, peer dynamics, work, school, coaching dynamics. But probably the most important place to derive some of your boundaries from when you are grieving is your gut or your intuition. Grief teaches us that we have little or no control. Think about setting boundaries based upon what and how you can derive a sense of personal power, control, or influence. And I'm not talking about control that comes from a place of domination or grasping or neediness. I'm talking about a place of control that comes from your own personal wisdom with your head and your heart and your gut, so that you can then know what a safe, supported, effective boundary is for you while you are grieving. So just a few quick tips about how you might consider establishing some of these boundaries for yourself. Imagine using I statements. I statements that you've rehearsed in your mind, I statements that you've tried on for size to see how they feel, to see if they feel supportive, if they give you space or they give you connection, depending on what it is that you need. So there could be statements such as, what I need is, and you fill in the blank. What I need is time. What I need is space. What I need is quiet. What I need is connection. What I need is acknowledgement. The second place that you can think of creating some safe boundaries of is with the concept, and we've heard it all before, that no is a complete sentence. So imagine that you need to learn how to say no when you are grieving, even though it can be daunting to say. Your no thank you doesn't need justification, it doesn't need rationalizing, it doesn't need excuses. It needs to feel right for you, and it needs to feel important in the moment that you're setting that boundary. So if packing up the clothes that someone told you to do doesn't feel right to you, then don't do it. Say, I'll consider that. I just know it's not right for me in this moment. If visiting the gravesite isn't right for you, please don't feel you need to defend that. And please feel that you can say, when it's right for me, I will be doing that. You could say, thank you for your input. I'll take that into consideration. I know that right now, that's not right for me to be doing. If getting pregnant right now or trying to become pregnant right now doesn't feel right for you, this is not anything you need to be doing from a place of fear or from a place of others' input, others' expectations. Please know that this is a place to say, thank you for the consideration. Let it roll off your back. And then know that you have your firm boundary, that you're checking in with your head, your heart, your gut in terms of what is right for you right now. And you do not, please do not make expectations, apologies, or rationalizations for knowing what is right for you. Our grief separates us from our intuition, and this is such an important role that we need to use our intuition while setting healthy grieving boundaries. The other places that I certainly have experienced in my grief situations, and most people that I sit with talk about, is needing to safeguard their physical and their emotional energies when it comes to socializing or condolence responses. Decide what is right for you in the realm of your social exposure, in the realm of your physical tasks. Condolence responses can be overwhelming. Though they are heartfelt and intended to support, they can still be overwhelming. If people are asking you to go for coffee or to join them for a meal, if you want to go, then let them know. I would like to make this happen, and I'm going to say yes now, but please know that the day of it may not be right for me, and so I may be canceling. Make some wiggle room for yourself to be able to have an in-the-moment decision around your boundaries of what is right for you in the moment. One of the other things that happens so frequently is for people to be asking the details of the death that you are now mourning. Sometimes telling the story, I call it, you almost become a grief hostess or a funeral hostess. Sometimes telling the story can be so re-triggering that it causes us pain and further trauma to be retelling the story to somebody that really doesn't need to know the details. They are mostly asking those details so that they can separate themselves and go, oh, okay, I'm safe from this because X, Y, and Z makes it different for me. This wouldn't happen to me. Know that you are not obligated to be sharing the intimate details of the loss that you have experienced. Please feel free to tell people, I understand you wanting to know. However, retelling the story isn't serving me right now. If there comes a time when it's okay, I'll let you know. As a grief therapist, my obvious bias is to suggest that you seek help in establishing some of your grief boundaries. Seek help, seek counseling, whether it's peer support or group therapy, individual one-on-one therapy. Somebody outside of your family and those relationships might be the right person to help you set some boundaries, because they are not locked into a relationship with you that is predefined by their own sense of how they can support you. Are you introverted, extroverted? What is their style of help? Please imagine that a counselor from outside would be able to help you set some strong grief boundaries so that you can in fact save your time and attention and emotional energies for the work that you need to do. I want you to consider that perhaps grief counseling might be more of a consultation process. Obviously, this video is a wide sweeping generalization about how you might establish and maintain some supported, grounding, protective boundaries in your grief. However, I hope it has planted some seeds for thought in terms of how you might be able to make that happen in your grief, and therefore your actions and your behaviors can be determined by your boundaries. If you had found this video to be helpful, please like it with the thumbs up below, so that YouTube will know to push it out to other people that might be struggling with the same concern around how to do their grief safely. If you wish to explore other videos that speak of boundaries in general, please consider watching Dr. Nicole Pera, and please consider also joining and watching Mel Robbins' videos. I'll make links to them in both the comments and the description of the videos, so that you can take their wise, sage advice around boundaries in general and then imagine applying it to your grief. As always, when doing your grief work with boundaries, those boundaries need to come from an internal place that includes kind thoughts, kind words, and a kind heart as you do your grief work. I look forward to meeting with you next time. Thank you.